Hi, Fadel. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Max. Nice to meet you too. Good
Uh,
morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Founders Talk. This is, for the listeners, this is an initiative that's been started by a company called TeKeya, the company I co-founded. We're featuring founders of, startup companies. We're featuring people that want to do good for society and doing good and doing well as a business as well. Fadel, you have a very interesting background. We'll come back to that. Welcome again. Great to talk to you. Another important point here I wanted to flag is that today we will touch upon the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know well, Fadel, this is the week that is called the Global Goals Week. This is led by the United Nations. So 75 years ago, the United Nations was founded, currently having 193 member states actually contributing. An important other point is that 5 years ago, actually in 2015, the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals Initiative, was kicked off. So we're 5 years down the line now. As you know, Fadel, there are 17 different development goals that are all like integral, right? So they're integrated goals: fighting climate, fighting zero hunger, sustainable living, and so on. And the SDGs are aiming for, let's say, they drew a line in the sand, which is the year 2030, in order to hit many goals. And for many countries, for instance, when it comes to zero hunger, they want to, have zero hunger eradicated for at least 50%, right, by the year 2030. So the coming decade, 2020, 2030, will be one of absolute importance. So that's something we're going to talk about. But first things first, why don't we introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about our professional journey through life. You might want to tap in your private journey as well, what you have learned, and let's take it from there. So over to you.
Wonderful. Okay. I mean, thank you for the call, and I'm really happy that TeKeya is having this initiative, and thank you for inviting me as well. I'm definitely very humbled at that. My name is Fadel, or Mohamed Fadel. I'm an Egyptian, and I've had an interesting journey so far in life. I think I would say it started off when I was 18 or 19 when I joined. I was in university, and I was quite lost in life. I was an extrovert, extremely shy, all of that, and then I got into extracurriculars basically. So I got introduced into things in university, and when I came across ISIC. It's a global organization that aims for a lot of things, but it does it in a very special way. And I joined in 20 when I was 18, 19 years old, and I started off as a member in that organization. I started off in a local chapter during my university time. I was a computer science student who didn't know any better. I was not doing so great at university because I was not really sure why I was doing what I was doing, and just didn't really rest well with me. But I just went with that, and I found a lot of my interests piling up in my work that I was doing in ISIC, and it gave me a lot of purpose in my day-to-day. As that lost 18-year-old who really knew nothing about what they wanted to do in life, didn't really know anything about what comes next, about how to look at life in different perspectives, see the world through a bigger lens. And ISIC gave me that. So I kept going in ISIC. I started off as a member, just started seeing the path forward. And what ISIC does, ISIC is an organization that does exchange, but it does it for a bigger purpose. ISIC was started in 98. Also, like today, like this year, ISIC is around 73 years old. So it's almost as old as the United Nations, because it's also started as an answer to the Second World War. And that happened then. But up until today, ISIC is fighting for one big thing that I think makes sense for everyone, which is humankind's potential. And that became a purpose that I fought for every single day of my past 8 years in the organization. And I spent a lot of time doing that. I spent a lot of time learning as I went, trying to strive for that high mission, for that kind of. It's kind of, when you think of it, the word peace itself, it's a very big thing. I mean, you could consider peace when it comes to the way countries look at each other, the way that countries treat each other, and so on. But how do you consider peace, or how do you target peace? How do you make peace happen, and so on? And peace back then in 1948, 1945, all that was a very different concept than peace today. But the concept of peace, if you can implement peace, if you can achieve peace, and so on, that is something that would change the world entirely. And that's something that we strive for. And we did it by trying to bridge the gaps between communities together, between people, to understand one another, to get people to understand diversity, to connect together, get closer. So I did that, and just found myself in that organization. I found myself there. I just put my studies aside, which was not the best idea, definitely, but it worked out. I think I graduated, so that was the good thing. But I mean, I graduated like one semester later, which was quite fine, I believe. But then kept moving forward, and I think I found myself there, and I then moved from my local level to the national commit level, and I led the branch of ISIC inside of Egypt, and then I moved to the global level, and then I led the technology systems, the platforms, which was finally a good use of my studies, because I studied computer science, so that made sense that I work with tech finally. And then at the very end, which started like September 2018, I was leading the whole organization. I was leading the global organization of ISIC. Today is September 2020, so exactly 1 year ago, I had finished my tenure with ISIC, and I came back home to Egypt, and just been discovering myself along the way. It's been hard, because I've moved from a place where I was leading over 40,000 young people towards something as purposeful as peace and fulfillment of humankind's potential, to trying and find myself again. And that was a hard mission. So I came back. I started looking for jobs. I wasn't really certain what I wanted to do. So I just jumped into the job hunt straight away. I started looking for something to do. I just felt that I don't want to just be sitting at home thinking too much of what I need to do or what I should do. And instead, I thought I just need to throw myself back into work, back in the job market, and see where that takes me. So I joined a company in Egypt. It's called TeKeya. And what they do is they focus a lot on trying to very simply, it's like an Uber, but basically for connecting goods or shipping goods from one place to the other. They do it wonderfully, and it was a fairly new startup when I joined. And I've had a wonderful time there. I was working there as a product manager, and I enjoyed it a lot. The community was great. The people were great. But just one day I woke up and I felt that I just wasn't connecting to the essence of the company. Although I think I believe they do great work, but just was not the right thing for me. I just did not feel that same fire that I was feeling every day for almost 8 years in ISIC. And I felt I was destined to do something more. I believed that I should be doing something more. So at that moment, I just weighed my options. I started looking over, okay, so this is my reality right now. My reality is I'm home. I'm not paying rent, like very logically. I'm in a comfortable place right now. I've got a bit of financial runway that can keep me going. If I want to take a risk in my life right now, probably this is the best time for me to do that. So I just decided to jump ship, and which was a hard decision. And I decided to explore a couple of things. So I decided I've always wanted to write. I've always thought I wanted to write. I always said I wanted to write. Fiction. I was always inspired by books by J.K. Rowling, by those kinds of books. And I thought I wanted to create a world of my own. I wanted to create something like that. But at that moment, I didn't feel that's something to tell. I had a story to tell. I had to go in fiction, and I decided to write my memoir. It's a memoir about my experiences in ISIC, but also my experience growing up as an introvert. And next to that, also I'd venture into coaching, I'd venture into consulting as well, because I've seen that that's possible. I've seen that I've done that as well before. So why not take it a bit seriously to those domains? And just like 2 months ago, I finally launched my book. It's called Grayscale. So I became an author at that moment. I was feeling it was a hard few months getting that out. But the work was worth it, the process was worth it. And I did that, launched it, had a successful launch, thankfully, and really enjoyed it. And then since then, what else should I do? And then I've been taking more and investing a bit more into coaching, but I've also, next to that, joined a friend in co-founding a startup. And I'm going to delve a lot deeper what startup is, but that's also something I've been doing on the side since then, and figuring out as we go. And also during the time of COVID, it has not been the easiest thing. So I'll also share a bit as we go. But I think, yeah, that's kind of my story.
Well, thanks, Fadel. Thank you.
I just want to want to know also more about you. I'm very interested in learning more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before I do that, I'm very impressed by your journey. Clearly, you're a man with a lot of capabilities. I mean, background computer science, was a student who was like, focusing on, is this the right thing to do or not? And then stepping into ISEC and literally climbing the whole ladder to become the global president, which is impressive. Then you took the decision to write a book on your memoirs.
Yeah.
You don't strike me as a very old person, so that means that you already have a lot of experience in life that you can share with other people. So very impressed. I'm sure that people who are listening to this would be like, oh, I would love to do this. This would be, I want that. Just a question on that, right?
Yeah.
If you look at your, let's say like your mindset or your behavior, what kind of traits specifically shine through in order to reach all those goals?
What ISEC is about leadership at the end of the day, and they focus on developing the kind of leadership that we need in young people and the kind of leadership that we believe that the world needs. And I think every leader has specific traits, or every person has specific traits. But then you look at a leader, and a leader has a couple of specific things that makes them who they are. And I think those things are the ISEC things that I grew up to and grew with for the past. It's been almost like my ISEC journey has been almost a third of my life. So it's been a very big portion of my life, and that's why I feel very grateful to it. I think leaders need to be self-aware. They need to know who they are. They need to know what they bring to the table. They need to know what they're good at, what they're not. On a daily basis, that's something that you figure out every single day. You figure out who you are. You see where you stand, and that's something that everyone needs to do. Next to that, you need to be aware of what's happening in the world around you. You need to be aware of the diversities. You need to be aware of the differences that are ongoing, because to be a leader is not to be a leader in your own hometown or in your own local committee, in your local. And it's to see a world in a bigger perspective, and that's something that we also need to have to be the right kind of leader. And to figure out other things out, you need to actually be a person who's always looking for solutions, a person who's not oriented towards problems, but actually oriented towards figuring those problems out, instead of just staying stuck in one place and asking, what am I going to do, and so on. You just move forward, figure things out, and within all those uncertainties that are happening throughout every single day, because every single day is a journey of its own. You just move forward no matter the circumstances, no matter what's going on. And going through all of those things, you just figure out that there's always a higher call, always a purpose that is out there. And specific traits that are there, those are things that you could embody, but to have a specific trait that you could reach out for, that's always going to be, I think, as long as you're always striving to be better. I think that's the one thing for you to achieve great things. And I don't think I've achieved great things yet. I think life is a journey of itself of achieving great things, of always trying to strive to get more, to do more, and so on. I think as long as you're trying, I think as long as you believe in the possibility, and as long as you keep striving, no matter what, you're going to fall lots of times. I failed a lot in my journey as well. I'm sure you failed.
So,
I would love to hear about your failures. Are in the essence of getting somewhere. As long as you get back up at some point, that's what you need.
definitely, Fadel. Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a good moment for me to also introduce a little bit more about myself.
Yeah.
There are a few points that you mentioned here in the last part where you talked about self-awareness, right? You spoke about taking risks, and you also alluded to solution thinking, not problem thinking. And and those points you just mentioned are very important. And I think there's one other element in there, and that is kind of hidden maybe, but it's a healthy level of competitiveness as well. You know, and it's not necessarily competition to beat the other people. It's the competition with yourself, basically, where you want to, you know, come to a better solution, take this step into the unknown, you know, and be a little bit, you know, hard on yourself in a way, right? And I think that's also, that has a big overlap with self-awareness, by the way. So let me tap into that as well. I think my background, you know, I'm Dutch origin. As a kid, fascinated by biology, and so where my friends were maybe sometimes playing computer games, I was literally outside catching butterflies and amphibians, everything you can think of. Still today, my friends, when they see an insect or they find something in their gardens, they send me on the WhatsApp group. They send me, Max, what's this? And then I respond to them, you know, because I know it. For some reason, that is all in the back of my mind because it's purely my interest back in the day. I know that I remember as a child, I said, I want to become a biologist. And I remember it was my uncle, I said, who was a businessman, who still is a businessman. It's like, Max, you're not going to earn any money through biology, right? So I'm like, oh, well, a little bit off track. So what am I going to do, right? So a young kid, a dreamer, and basically went through high school and college and everything, just on a path that I didn't really know what I was doing, honestly speaking. Long story short, I climbed to the highest level because as a kid, when I was just a dreamer, at that time in the Netherlands, in the educational system, that wasn't really awarded in a sense. So what happened was that I ended up in a class like, you know, put him to a technical school because, you know, he's not really hitting the marks as it should be. So they were completely not taken into consideration that my thoughts were somewhere else, completely somewhere else. Anyway, with a little bit more of, you know, guidance and dedication from my side, I finished graduating from university in a master's degree in environmental sciences. Actually, it's now called life sciences. So that has a clear biomedical overlap. So back to that biology point, right? So yeah, I graduated, and basically as of then, I put myself in a race. So I would like to call it. As of university, I went into corporate business, and basically life science equals pharmaceuticals. And again, I started off within pharmaceutical organizations, huge corporation actually. I started off in a department which was just focusing on science, medical science. I say just because I found out that that was not enough for me. I wanted to explore. So I saw people who were in marketing, and I saw people who were in the commercial sales organization, and I want to try that. So that's what I basically did, and I did it for a long time. In all honesty, probably did it a little bit too long. So to that point, I worked in pharmaceutical corporations for about 17 years. But hey, I wanted to make it fun for me as well, right? So what did I do? I put myself, like what you said, I put myself on a challenge all the time. So what did I do? I started off in the Netherlands, and then in the Netherlands, I moved into the marketing organization, which was something I had no background, right? So I had to learn and force myself to learn it on the job. I did really well. Yeah. I moved to Spain. I had a role which is what they call regional role, so overseeing multiple countries. I lived in Madrid for 2 years. And I found out that I put myself to other challenges. I wanted to integrate myself into the society in Madrid. I lived in the center of Madrid, you know, the typical Spanish way of life, having, you know, late dinners at 10 o'clock. And I wanted to study the language. So I started forcing myself to read the Spanish newspapers. Still today, I can read, therefore, I can read, you know, Spanish web pages, etc., the news. So I learned a lot in that job. It wasn't enough for me. It wasn't enough for me. I got an opportunity to move to the other part of the world, which was Japan. Without any study, knew nothing about the culture, society, nor the language. Moved to Japan, stepped into an important role as a marketing director for the local organization in Japan. You know, amazing experience. I speak some Japanese. I can read a little bit of Japanese, again, because I've put myself to the challenge.
You speak Dutch, English,
yes,
Spanish, anything else?
Yeah, I can read and write French and stuff like. But that's probably
wonderful.
That's probably because I was born on the border between the Netherlands and Belgium, so we've got all these languages kind of mixed. But having said that, Japanese is totally different, right? So managed teams in Japan, did really well, got promoted, got a job in headquarters, which is in London. Literally flying overnight in the weekend from Japan, having lived in Japan for almost 5 years, flying to London. I thought that would land really well for me because it's Northwest Europe. Well, little did I know that I had a struggle you cannot imagine, because it's a totally different culture again. On top of that, and that's what I always advise people when I was mentoring people, and I'm still doing that. When you work in large corporations, go to the core of the corporate, because the corporate world will teach you a lot of things that you probably you know, didn't expect. So there are some political elements in there. Right. So that was my journey in London, and then last but not least, I made my last move out to the Middle East. Landed a job in Dubai, managed over 100 people, oversaw the Gulf Corporation Council for both marketing, sales, and business development. Again, a fantastic journey, and I put myself to the challenge because, listen, Japanese, Northwest European, Spanish, and then landing in Arabic culture, managing mainly Egyptians and Pakistani, was a totally different ballgame, right? And again, amazing. And then people tell me, you know, Max, you were so lucky to do that. And maybe you've heard that yourself, but like, you know, you're so lucky. You're the president of the ISAC, and you did. But I always tell people, listen, it is me that took myself on that journey. It is me that opened those doors with risk, because there's always a risk involved, right? How will it land? Will I be able to live in the country? Will I be able to manage those people, etc.? Can I be successful? But you always need to try. And there's something that, back to your point, Fadel, it's the self-awareness piece. Because what people ask me, you know, what did you learn most? I always respond that I actually learned most about myself, just me. How can I handle these situations? How can I, therefore, find the solutions when problems come up? So definitely the case. And then, and I think you and I have an overlap, I made the decision after 17 years of corporate life, climbing the corporate ladder as high as I could, made the decision to quit. At the moment I quit, I got married. We have a 11, 12 days old son now. So we're absolutely—
Congratulations.
Thank you. So happy. But listen, I don't have a real job anymore, right? So here you go. So this is again seeking that risk. What we did is, my wife and me, we together founded a company called TeKeya. And this company is all about doing good for society, and at the same time doing well as a business. So that is being defined as a social enterprise nowadays.
Yeah.
It's a company that's basically battling food waste. So definitely founded on the SDGs, as we alluded to earlier. You know, it's basically, in a nutshell, we have created an application, online application for the Egyptian market, where we have created a digital marketplace, if you will. Like every marketplace, we're connecting the supply with the demand, right? So in our case, the supply is restaurants, grocery stores, hotels that have surplus food. Instead of them having that surplus food being wasted or thrown away, we're actually repurposing it. How we do that? We do that through our application on our online platform. We are helping them to sell the surplus meals at a reduced price. And we're connecting them with people who are interested in buying those meals. I mean, those are perfectly fresh meals still. They're at a reduced price. And most of the people we are connecting with are the ones that are mindful about the environment, for instance, because the impact of food waste, maybe you know or you don't know, Fadel, but if food waste were to be a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases after the US and China. So it's a huge impact on the world and the environment. So through this company and the big pivot I made in my personal career, my journey, you know, through our company, we really want to leave our fingerprint and do good. And that's something, you know, that really takes guts and bravery in order to get this going.
But out of all those experiences, like out of going to Japan, going back to London, starting off in Madrid, where do you think which period of your life do you think you've learned the most, or about yourself?
So that's a very good question. I think it was all the journeys I did was in a time period of exactly 10 years, basically.
Okay.
And if I look back, and it's really look back in the beginning of my career, say Madrid, I thought I basically knew everything, right? Honestly, I'll be honest with you. You know, I made this big move to Madrid. All my peers in the Netherlands, you know, I was the first one to move to Spain, or actually Japan as well. I thought I knew everything, Fadel, but actually I came to find out that I did not at all. And the part of self-awareness only came at a later stage when I really faced hurdles in, for instance, managing Japanese teams. For some reason, my Western style didn't land at all. I cut them off. I said, no, this is wrong. You should do it like this. I came to know, and this is really the part that I took away from Japan and actually the Japanese culture, which is all about the community-based thinking. Instead of having a vocal, high voice, typical Western pushy voice, I chose to step back, sit back, and listen. So listen more than you speak. My Japanese boss told me many times, Max, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and there's a reason for that. And I will never. So listen twice as much as you speak. So those things, that for me goes hand in hand with being self-aware as well. Yeah, definitely. All right, okay. So Fadel, before we move on, let's have a quick break because we're basically out of time. I'll reconnect in 5 minutes. I think so far we had a very interesting, actually great conversation about you know, our personal life journeys, both business and private, right? Interesting as well. I see that there's quite some overlaps you and I both have, and specifically in the way you approach the world. My main takeaway here is really about the self-awareness as one, you know, the challenge you want to set yourself constantly. So that's kind of risk-taking. So I think that is great. And then and the last piece, you know, is did I mention self-awareness or no? Self-awareness. Okay. So it's basically around that. So entrepreneurial mindset, risk-taking, and self-awareness. So great. All right. Another topic, very interesting. You were talking about your startup, the most recent one you're working on, and you're looking into pivoting. as we discussed in the opening of this talk, we're touching on social development goals, social enterprises. So could you tell me a little bit more about your views on SDGs, and actually also what the challenges are you think the concept of social development goals is facing at the moment?
I mean, I got introduced to the SDGs as soon as they happened, because in ISIC we SDGs. Before that, there was always the MDGs, but we never really spoke about them in ISIC. So the SDGs, I think that they're very positive. They were marketed very well. They were planned very well as well, and the way that they were put out for people, for countries, for member states was done very, very effectively. So I mean, a lot. And people today are a lot more aware than people back then knew about the MDGs. That was the very, very positive thing that has happened. My affinity with the SDGs happened when ISIC back in 2015, as soon as the SDGs were released, just assumed ownership of the SDGs as well, and we decided at that moment, straight then, and wanted to take that on ourselves, and wanted to completely on board with the movement towards making the SDGs happen. So we invited all the national presidents of ISIC, or the country directors of ISIC, and they went to the United Nations, and we had what we call the Youth Action Summit. And we had the youth envoy for the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ahmed Hindawi, and he came and we ratified that we're starting the move by actually aligning every single one of our projects to fit the criteria of what the SDGs require. And then we started building a lot of impact, like a lot of impact matrices, or a lot of impact measurements, able to create indicators, or like specifically youth indicators for the SDGs fulfillment and so on. So those were a lot of movements that happened. And since then, we've also been having a lot of conversations to how to make sure that every single action that we're doing is in a way aligned to the SDGs, so that we are fully on board with pushing those SDGs forward. And of the way there's been a lot of positives. There's been a lot of things that have been going well. There's been a lot of action in that domain. But then when you look at the SDGs as a bigger picture, I think one of the problems is there are a lot of paper tigers in the situation. There's a lot of talk, but not a lot of action. There's a lot of emphasis on the things that are happening, but there's not as much collaboration. And you need to acknowledge a positive thing. There has been progress, that's for sure, and that's what we all see. There has been progress, and I think that's the good thing about the situation, is that things are moving forward. But your problem here is that they're not really moving forward fast enough. And then when you look at today, when you look at reality with COVID impacting us, I mean, SDGs were initially not moving forward fast enough. I mean, you'd see Antonio Guterres was constantly coming up talking about the catastrophe that we're facing right now. And based on all metrics, based on all predictions, we're not getting there in the rate that we ought to be. But with COVID hitting us, if you're having progress, not sufficient to hit those goals. I mean, it's expected to be hit by 2030. There's a group called the Social Progress Imperative, and the head of the group was looking into the research of the progress of the SDGs, and the research was that yes, making progress, that's great, but we're actually decades behind on achieving those. And he said, like, the number, it was shocking for me, is that we're actually 52 years behind achieving the SDGs. So if we're actually going to achieve the SDGs by the current progress that we're moving at, we're going to achieve it by 2082. I mean, we're meant to achieve it by 2030. So that's the reality that we're in. With COVID hitting, the progress has slowed down even further than was slow. And in my opinion, what is needed, and what I've seen, and what I've been dealing with also a lot with my conversations back when I was in ISIC and so on, is that there needs to be a lot of operation, a lot of greater cooperation between countries happening at a scale it ought to be. There are things happening, but the scale of it is not enough to move things forward. And you look at those 15 goals, and they need a lot of work. And it's not only going to come. I mean, it needs forward. It needs work from every sector of society. It needs to, from every sector. I guess you need governments. You need agencies. You need every single element of society, every single part of society pushing for that. But the biggest element that you need is the cooperation of nations, and that's not how it should be. It's not moving in the direction it ought to be. So it's fun to see. And honestly, I mean, you could give me your opinion there, is that I don't know what's going to happen. We have 10 years left. Reality is that we're decades behind. So I have faith. I mean, I've always been a person who has a lot of hope, has a lot of faith, and I like to embrace that. But it's scary if I'm with you. And there are things that are scarier than others. That's bad. You look at poverty, that's bad. You look at hunger, that's bad. You look at education as well. But there are a lot of things that need to move forward, and they're kind of hindered. They're kind of standing still. I mean, I wouldn't say they're standing still because they're moving, but the progress is not as fast as it ought to be. So you imagine that it is actually standing still. So I don't know. What is your take on all that?
No, so there's a lot of agreement I have with you there. For me, SDGs were not that prominent on within my scope, basically. Especially, as I explained in the corporate world, there are other KPIs, right? And now leading this the new company, the social enterprise, our KPIs are defined differently. So how do we want to be good for society? We have social impact indicators, as we call them. We're looking at how much CO2 reduction we can gain through our work. We're looking into the number of meals we are saving per day, right? So far in our very short history, the company found its inception mid-19. We saved over, I think, probably 3,000 to 4,000 meals, which is great, right? It's pretty great. Small, but it's a great contribution, and we did that mainly through donations, actually. So we made sure that the poor were given great meals in Egypt, and that actually links it back to the part of the problem, right? So I think where I agree with you on the fact is it's not moving fast enough. And giving you the example of corporate world, where I was pinned down and everyone was pinned out on KPIs. And as you know, we have different kinds of KPIs, but especially the lead KPIs, the hard measurement points, which is always money and market share gain, but particularly your revenue targets. And that was like, that's the holy grail, right? That kind of mindset, you do not typically see that in organizations like the UN. The reasons for that, I mean, it's multifactorial. I mean, that's political, it's economical. There are so many different agendas of the 193 member states. It's very fragmented, unfortunately. So I think what is so interesting is they set this theoretical goal of 2030, which I think it's a major improvement. But I just learned from you, and it's an interesting fact. I didn't know that we're 52 years behind, right? So this has to be accelerated tremendously. But you can only do that through integration and participation. And in the current climate, and that's part where COVID comes in. The current climate, which puts so much pressure on societies, what you see happening, at least from my point of view, is instead of this overall communal approach, like a participation kind of approach, we actually see the opposite, right? It's like polarization almost. You see the political climate, I think the US is leading this, where you see a typical nationalistic approach where which completely goes into the objectives of SDGs. I mean, look at environment, climate change. I mean, we've got a leader in the US who wants to reopen coal mines. He's actually doing it because of mainly political reasons and short-term economical goals. Again, I don't want to go into any political discussion here, but this is my personal view from afar. So it actually goes against the principle at the moment. So we're 52 years behind, and actually maybe, I think honestly, in the current climate, maybe a little bit more. Now, if we bring it to COVID, COVID has a lot of negatives, but I think there's also a positive element in there. So COVID can also be an accelerator. What we've seen in Italy, for instance, or Spain, and at least in Europe, during the lockdowns, where people were actually coming together in a way that we hadn't seen before. We've seen, Venice. We've seen the canals in Venice becoming clear. Back in the Indian area, the Himalaya came up again. It's amazing.
Yeah.
This can be achieved. It can be achieved. And actually COVID could be, therefore, a kind of an accelerator. But there are so many forces that are playing at the moment. And from my point of view, this can only be, handled if people really come together hand in hand. And I've looked into the SDG goals for Egypt and the agenda for 2030 as well. I think Egypt in itself, obviously, is a country that has, and you know that better than I do, Fadel, but has tremendous issues on, from society perspective. Like it's clearly a developing country, but you have huge gender inequality still at the forefront. Big economical issues. There's a lot of work to be done, and the only thing I can say, and where I'm happy, if you look at the SDGs concept, at least it's something, they drew the line in the sand for 2030, and it's something for people to get back to. At least that exists, right? That exists. And then to round off my part, I mean, what we do as TeKeya, as a company, is really, we want to chip in. We really want to contribute, and if at all, we want to really create this community of people that are like-minded and have the awareness about, climate change, the awareness about food waste, the impact of food waste on climate change. We want to find solutions together from bottom up, trying to find out, how we can have, more food security in Egypt. That could even go back as far as help farmers to, cultivate distribution, supply chains improvements, and so on. So that's the vision we have in TeKeya as a company. So yeah, so that basically is my take on that.
I think I do agree with you. I think there are with how people are reacting to it, and you've seen in certain areas and certain places how COVID has positively moved certain people. But you look at the other side of things. You look at the people are rejecting the idea of quarantining. You see that there's a lot of irresponsible behavior going on, and I think that same socially responsible behavior is that same behavior that we see when it comes to trying to drive the message of sustainable. So I think we can get that if we can get people who are socially responsible, which is a lot of work, because you want to move 7 billion people into one direction. Way that you're going to get that, but the faster way, not the faster way, but the more ideal way would be if you get governments, countries, member states, basically making sure that there are policy changes that are actually happening. I think that's the best. Getting all those kind of countries, states cooperating in that direction, and then working your way with that, with all the policy changes, all the systematic changes that need to happen. Getting to work on the individuals, getting to work on people actually believing that thing. And I think that's where increasing the awareness from startups, from companies, and so on. I mean, you mentioned it, companies are not paying. They have their holy grail, which is the revenue that's coming in and all that. And to them, there is no pressure. There needs to be enough pressure by governments on all kinds of companies to embrace that, if you don't place that pressure on them, they're going to move forward, because I mean, what do I have to lose? And to them, what the typical answer of what do I have to lose is money. And if you don't put a bigger pressure on them, then they're not going to follow you. But I think the great thing, startups are having that mentality. A lot of organizations are having that mentality, NGOs and so on. But it needs everyone. That's the thing. It needs all of us. I have faith. I am, and by you have faith because you believe in the impact that you're personally doing, which is perfect. I mean, for like 3,000 to 4,000 meals, that is a great step. I mean, that can double and double and double. Like that's only going to get better. That's only going to get bigger, and that's a. It only happens when all of us get along, and I think that's the battle right now. COVID has shown us that we can get along, but it still has shown us that there are a lot of people who are not on board, and that's change needs to happen. Yeah.
Exactly, Fadel. So I think both you and I looking forward to the SDG week and the development goals week that is actually happening at the moment. Started up the 18th of September and it finishes the 25th. They have now embraced, because of COVID, the UN has embraced a new term which is called factivism. Factivism, I had to read it a couple of times, where they're looking into the current status, and I think it's a good the current status. I mean by that is, where is each and every individual state? Where are you guys on this journey? We have 10 years to go. The decade of change has to come. We want to really measure down those facts. Where are you today? And I think that's where COVID really put like a magnifying glass on situations. Regardless of the fact, you're totally right. It brings people together, and on the other hand, it separates people as well. And that's something that I think is not good at all. We've seen it actually. We've seen the virus being politicized in the US, for instance, which is amazing. You've seen it now, other countries picking up on the same thing. But I think in conclusion, from my point, and then I'll give it to you, I think in conclusion, when it comes to SDGs and the path forward, from my point of view, it really is all about the incremental changes. And I think that's what you were alluding to when you said all the member states, paying their part, bringing it to the table. Maybe that's what factivism is also looking at. But incremental changes and unity, that's literally what it's all about, because otherwise it literally will be a theoretical goal. So maybe your last words on that, Fadel, and then they will have to.
I think my last word is going to be very simple. I think the key word to making this happen. And so this is going to happen. This is how the SDGs are, and this is how we fix our world, basically. So togetherness, that's what we need right now. That's what I believe.
I fully agree with you. Fadel, thank you very much for your time. It's a very engaging conversation with you. I think we could go on for hours, honestly. Sharing. I
mean, I'm going to catch up with you after this. Like, we're just not going to. I mean, we're definitely going to do a lot more of this for sure.
I am convinced. Fadel, with this, thank you very much for your time. A lot of success on your future endeavors. I'm sure you will be successful, and let's keep in touch. Thanks a lot, man. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. Take care.
Bye. Take care. Bye.